And we'd like to welcome everyone to the Sun Journal's 2012 high school football season preview here at the Sun Journal's palatial home offices of 104 Park Street in Lewiston. Thank you all for joining us today as we break down a fall season that remarkably is just a few minutes away from starting. Golf started today, field hockey starts tomorrow. We're here for some football. Football starts this Friday. Tonight we're going to bring you a breakdown of all the conferences here in our coverage area: Western Class C, Western Class B, Eastern Class B, and Eastern Class A. We'll get to those a little bit later, and we'll also be joined by a couple of guests who will help with that breakdown. Well, without any further ado, let's bring in our experts here at the Sun Journal. Kalle Oakes.
Yeah, that's a lot to live up to when you're calling us experts.
And Randy Whitehouse.
Here at the Sun Journal, though.
Yeah.
As we fling pens around.
Joining us also will be all of you. We'll have a live video and a live moderated chat here this evening, so you can send us some photos, send us some questions, and we'll answer them. We'll be showing you some photos from last season as well.
Or send us some photos.
So without taking up any more of your time, we'll turn to Randy and Cal, and we'll try to make sense of this wacky football scene, especially in Western Class C. It seems like it's a wide open race this year in Western Class C. People want to talk about Yarmouth and what they've done over the last couple of years. Maybe you give them the benefit of the doubt and start them off as favorites, but boy, this is a wide open field here.
Yeah, in thinking about the four regions that we're talking about, this is the one that seems to have the greatest depth of teams that are kind of within the same bracket with each other. I don't see Yarmouth as a head and shoulders favorite at all. I mean, I see them certainly in the conversation when you've won 2 straight state championships and had the record they've had over the past 3 years and that level of success, but they did it with a lot of seniors who are no longer there. They kind of lost the architect of the program when head coach Jim Hartman went to Portland in the offseason, so it's kind of a new regime. Other teams have stepped up their game. We've gradually seen Trape kind of get back into that picture, and I think, Randy, a ton of local teams could get into that hunt. We're talking about Winthrop, Oak Hill, Lisbon, Poland. It kind of all depends on depth and injuries and eligibility and how they mature from point A to point B in the season. But I think a lot of those teams will be in that conversation.
Yeah, talking to those local coaches, like you mentioned, they said they can't remember a time when Western C was this deep in terms of overall talent and overall competitiveness. Dick Moynihan from Lisbon was the first one to say it to me. And of course, Dick says that every year, so I was a little bit of a skeptic at first. But then after talking to, he was very insistent upon it. And then after talking to some of the other coaches, they agreed it's pretty wide open. Like you said, Yarmouth certainly has to be considered a favorite. They've got the track record. They've still got a lot of talent coming back, starting with Brady Nugent, the quarterback who's been there now. This will be his 3rd year. Trape, another finalist from last year, is certainly in the picture. One question mark with them is just their numbers. I read somewhere that they have just 21 kids, and it's going to be tough to survive an entire season.
That was kind of my question about Yarmouth, too.
21 kids. In Yarmouth, yeah, they always have a small roster.
I mean, there were as many reporters at their games on the sidelines last season as reserves.
That's right. So, that's a question. It could just be a battle of attrition. And another team, Marana Cook, is certainly a team you have to look for. They have a lot coming back. Caleb Castongwe, their quarterback. They lost Luke Emery, a very talented running back, but they still have a lot of talent coming back. And there's a bunch of teams last year that had kind of down years that I think are going to be stepping up this year. Winthrop, Oak Hill, Dirigo, Poland should be better this year. So I think the overall depth of the conference is definitely as good as it's been in a long time.
3 teams that interest me in particular. Marana Cook, as you mentioned, because even without Luke Emery, they put it to Winthrop pretty good the other night in an exhibition game. I think that kind of set the tone for their season. Oak Hill with Stacey Doucette now as head coach, and I think you and I both agree that's long overdue for him to have his own program. And certainly on the offensive side of the ball, the Raiders will be as good as anybody. He's going to find ways to make kids make plays. And I think Poland with Whalen at quarterback is the key is keeping him from getting hit and keeping him healthy. Because last year, both games I saw that he was taking a beating, and that triple offense, the flexbone offense that they run, that's sort of the thing. Your quarterback's carrying the ball a lot. They got to find someone to take the load off him. But I think they ended the season last year with wins over Winthrop and Winslow, and kind of gave themselves a head start rolling into this year.
Yeah, the big thing is for them to get some confidence, and with that confidence, that breeds more success. It also breeds less mistakes. I mean, if there's one thing that's really hurt Poland over the last few years, it's been their own self-inflicted wounds. They stop hurting themselves like that. they could be a pretty consistent football team.
What do you think, Justin? Anything good?
Well, I think that everybody here on the on our live chat, which by the way, you folks at home, if you want to have a question for our football gurus here and Randy and Cal, feel free to write to us here on our live chat window here on sunjournal.com. We have one question pertaining to Western Class C that we've gotten so far here. It's a question from Cindy. She wants to know how we think Poland will do. I know we just quickly addressed that, but let's talk a little bit more. I mean, you're right. It's over the last few years, it's been self-inflicted wounds that have done the Knights in. They've had a lot of fumbles, in particular the games that I've covered. They just have had a hard time holding on to the ball.
It's a high-risk offense. Now you think of the passing game, and the spread offense is maybe more of a high-risk offense. The flex bone that they run is high risk because you have a lot of last-second pitches. You have the quarterback on the run, as talking about. You're putting the ball at risk a lot. The ball security is not a big, it's not a big thing. It's a big thing in football, but it's not something that's a real focus of that offense. It's out there for you to put the ball on the ground and hurt yourself, and they hurt themselves in a lot of games that I've seen in the last couple of years. But it seems like they've gradually gotten that. They've gone to a couple of, they've had the Navy coaches come up and actually run a camp for them the last couple of summers. They've really gotten they've fine-tuned that offense a lot to kind of their own liking, and they have a quarterback who, as we mentioned, runs it well and has run it for 2 or 3 years.
Ted Tibbetts has a term for the mistakes. He calls them RSU's, royal screw-ups. And it's a great term, and he tells his kids, if we can limit the RSUs, we don't need to be a great team. We just need to be a consistently good team. And when you have somebody like Whalen who's been running that offense for some time, that's a good place to start, obviously. And then you have some other kids at the skill positions who he knows where to expect them to be. They know where to expect to get the ball from him. That can make a huge difference, and that can keep the ball off the turf.
We mentioned it earlier, but I think there's something to be said for that, finishing your season with a win. Other than state champions, most schools don't get to do that because you go to the playoffs, you lose your last game. Poland didn't make the playoffs, but they won their last 2. They kind of gave themselves that momentum going in the offseason. It keeps you in the weight room early on and throughout. It just gives you a better feeling than going in and getting shellacked maybe in a quarterfinal game. So Poland might have had that going for them.
Sure.
We have another question coming in, actually, from our colleague down at the Forecaster newspapers, Mike Hoffer.
Wow.
First of all, he made sure to comment to make sure that to tell us that we all had faces for newspaper, which sounds very much like Mike Hoffer. But he's
on the radio all the time, so
well, which makes him having a radio face. Who dethrones Yarmouth and why? Is his question. Of course, Yarmouth, one of the bread and butter schools that Mike sees quite often down in his neck of the woods, and he's certainly seen a lot of winning out of Yarmouth over the last couple of years.
I've always been of the philosophy, and I think we see it with Leavitt, we see it with Mountain Valley, we see it with some of the power programs around here. You always count them as a favorite, whether no matter what they get coming back. So I think Yarmouth gets that respect right away for what they've done the last couple of years. I just think the gap is a lot smaller, and I think the margin for error is a lot less. If they were to lose a kid like they did last year, who's a key part of their offense for any length of time, I think they suddenly come back to the pack. And I think you mentioned, Trape doesn't have the numbers, but they do have the skill. I think some other schools, I think you're going to look at teams. I think this is one of those leagues that not only is it balanced, but teams are going to get better from game 1 to game 8. I think Oak Hill is going to be one of those teams. I know Lisbon's going to be one of those teams because of their eligibility situation. I think Winthrop and Poland are going to be teams like that because of just the nature of the offenses they run, the kids that they have. Some of them are in their second year and they're just starting to get it. I think they're going to have a tough time keeping that win streak going as the season goes on.
I don't want to spoil our page 2 column for Thursday's paper, so I won't reveal my pick. But as Cal said, Yarmouth's the favorite. There's no question about that. Trape, the low numbers, yes, but they have almost their entire line back. It's a big line. Not a lot of those in the Western C. They're the type of team that can take over a ball game and control the pace and just control the football. And they have their top running back whose name escapes me.
Corey Aldecoa.
That's the man, and he ran for like 1,600 yards last year. He's probably the best running back in the conference now. So, Trape's probably the primary contender. I'd put Miranda Cook up there, certainly. And who knows, one of these teams that had a bit of a down year last year may step up and challenge them, too.
We haven't even talked about Winslow, who I don't think you ever count them out. I mean, they kind of started quick and then went down at the end of their first season in Western C last year, but proud program with a lot of tradition there that is capable of getting on a roll as the season goes on.
We're getting a good bunch of questions in now. Thanks all for sending those in. Our next one comes from our buddy Jeff Schools. I guess he's working with Channel 6 now down there in Portland. Can Oak Hill make a run even if Jeff picks them?
Oak Hill's next team.
Wow.
Oak Hill has an intriguing set here. They've got 9 of their top 10 linemen back. These kids have been playing together forever. They've got most of their skill kids back. Of course, no Cody Depew, who was one of the top running backs in the conference last year. They're going to spread the ball around a little bit more, and with Stacey Doucette there as the coach and all that he brings from the Lisbon program, they're certainly well equipped to do that. The quarterback situation is a little bit unsettled at this point. Talking with Stacey, he kind of sees this kind of a 1A, 1B situation. You may see guys alternating in and out at quarterback this year, but they could definitely take a step up this year, especially I think having Stacey there has really rejuvenated the program. And they still have a number of of the old assistants from Oak Hill there to keep sort of that lineage going. But with Stacey in the program, there's a lot of excitement there.
Yeah, and I think they're one of those teams. They're another one of those teams that, like Poland, I think they've been undone in the last couple of years by those mistakes, those turnovers. They haven't been able to put that full game together, especially on defense. You'd see them hang in there with some of the better teams in the league in the first half, and then the second half of the game it would tail off, and it would cost them against teams like Lisbon, like Yarmouth, and they can't afford to have that. But if they can tighten that up, they're certainly going to be in the mix.
We'll find out a lot about them Saturday because they open up with Yarmouth. So,
Who does Dirigo have that needs to be watched? That's the next question here is from Wendy. I'm assuming probably up Dixfield Way.
I would assume so, yeah. Well, of course, there's no Brian Blackman this year. No Ben Holmes, a quarterback, but they still have a lot of senior talent there. From what I understand, they're going to be looking to distribute the ball a little bit more, spread it out more. Last year, the offense ran totally through Brian Blackman, and what did run through him was Ben Holmes throwing the football. This year, they've got a number of backs there. They're so confident in their offensive line that they were actually able to move, do some juggling, shift it around, move some guys from the offensive line to the backfield, which adds some experience back there, some blocking as well. I don't know that there's one in particular, one athlete in particular to watch, but certainly Brett Whittemore as a quarterback is going to be under some scrutiny, and it seems like they're going to have a little bit of a running back by committee back there.
All right, guys, one last one here before we move on to our next class. Randy, this is from Jim L. When will Lake Region finally win a game?
No.
Wrong class.
Exactly.
Next year they'll be in class.
Yeah, I was going to say Lake Region is in the wrong class. I'll just leave it with that.
Alrighty. So here we go now. That's Western C. That's our breakdown here. Of course, we ran our season preview here on Sunday in Sunday's paper. Check back on Sunday's paper for all of our predictions. It was prognosticated here by Kalle and Randy. Let's move on now. We turn our attention to Western Class B. Western Class B, of course, Mountain Valley. It is an even-numbered year. They're smaller and younger than they have been in the past, especially on their even-numbered years where they won championships. But do they once again wear the mantle of favorite?
I think if you like to say the favorite is usually the team that has either the most seniors or the most experience coming back. I think if you look at the teams in that league, Mountain Valley is that team. The question is, they do not have the depth they've had in the past. They have 5 juniors on the entire roster, and if you lose, I believe they have 10 seniors, most of whom start. A lot of them started last year, at least played a lot of time. A lot of experience, interior line on both sides, and in the backfield. But if any of those kids go down, and we're already getting reports that at least one player made the first 2 weeks for disciplinary reasons. If that's true, and if things like that continue to happen, you can see them coming back to the pack in a hurry. A lot of people obviously going to talk about Wells, just in the way that we talked about Yarmouth. They're going to be in that conversation just because of what they did last year. I believe they lost 17 seniors, but they're one of those teams that had a lot of those one-sided games, and you're putting kids in getting quality varsity time, and all of a sudden they're second and third year players this time around. They're ready to go. Greeley put a spanking on Cape Elizabeth in the preseason. Their team is going to be in the picture. Westbrook and Marshwood deepened that conference by dropping down from Class A last year, and they improved as the season went on. And I think, again, you're seeing a similar situation as we saw in Western C, where the gap is closing and it's getting a little wider in terms of the depth of the teams that could compete.
I'd add Falmouth into that
Oh,
mix.
yeah,
They
absolutely.
lost Jack Colleen, but they've still got a lot coming back as well. Yeah, it's interesting. There seems to be a slow transition going on here with Mountain Valley, and we're seeing that with the enrollment declining. They're obviously going to be petitioning up with the 4-class system, but it's not as easy a decision for them as it has been in the past. They've been petitioning up these last couple of years. Some questions about the talent that's in the pipipeline after that.
Yeah,
so,
that's something that doesn't get mentioned very often.
Right.
They could be a Class C
They
team
could
now
be,
if they
yeah.
wanted to. And then we'd be talking about a totally different story. They'd be the clear favorite.
Sure.
It's a little different situation.
And of course, the last couple of years, Wells has been in the conversation as well, and he's certainly not going to. Although they did lose 2 very dynamic players that were essentially what helped them this season or last season get through to the end in the Wells Warriors, and that was it's going to hurt, but. There's another program that you never really want to overlook in that class.
No, because they have the sheer numbers and they've had it. You know, and in B and C especially, you want to look at those teams that have a roster that's big enough that they can withstand the stuff that happens during the season. You know, that attrition that happens through injury, ineligibility, whatever it is. And Wells is certainly equipped to do that. Some of the other schools are a little newer to football in that conference, and they have a good solid first string and maybe some guys that can step in, but they don't have quite that depth of numbers.
Let's go to some questions now that we have here popping up on our live chat that goes along with this video session. First question that we have here is from Michael Hoffer down Forecaster Way. It says some people feel that Great New Gloucester is on their way back. And of course, the new coach this season. Do you guys agree? Is that a program that is on its way bouncing back?
It's going to be a process. It's not going to happen overnight, and I think hopefully the good folks in Greater Gloucester will be patient with Jim Hersom. I believe he's like the 5th coach in 7 years. He's obviously,
been a lot.
Obviously an outstanding teacher of the game. He's a guy that's taken 2 other schools to state championship games over the years, just in the last 20 years, with Livermore Falls and Edward Little, and now he's back as a head coach again. Just kind of, he's at that entry level with these kids. A lot of them are still very new to football. Maybe they played it at the grade school level, junior high, but maybe they're adapting to a new position, or they're just learning what it takes to compete in Class B high school football in Maine, which is just a huge jump. The thing that Coach Hersom is worried about is he's got a good group, 6, 7, 8 seniors that can play both ways. If any of those kids go down, and we talked about this with Mount Valley, and it's even more significant with Greater Gloucester, he's replacing them with freshmen. I mean, let's be honest. And as he said to me very candidly, you put those kids in the lineup, they take a beating, they don't come back for football as sophomores, and that's the kind of thing that's hurt Greater Gloucester. They haven't been able to sustain those big numbers that you need to win in Class B, because they've had kids just bail on the game. And I think if they can avoid that, if you can keep that excitement going, and get some kids out of the woodwork that maybe haven't played the last couple of years, they can turn the corner.
He's the guy to do it. He's done it everywhere he's been. Edward Little, Livermore Falls. He's like you said, Cal, teacher of the game, and that's what Gray needs really more than anything. When you're talking about a new program, you need someone to get everybody on the same page, to get everybody to understand what playing football is about. It's more than just a commitment on the field; it's a commitment off the field as well. And he's the person to really put that message home.
You guys both mentioned in that talking about Coach Hersom is Livermore Falls, which of course now is Spruce Mountain. Alongside Jay, they've combined this their second year together as a program in Spruce Mountain as a group. They are also thrown into that mix as well. Just talk a little bit about their relationship, and I know they really want them to forge a rivalry with geographic rival Mountain Valley, but last year, as we saw, it hasn't happened yet. Any closer this year? Any closer to being relevant? New coach, new mentality up there?
Yes and no. No, in the immediate future, I don't see it. But let's look at the big picture here. Walter Polke is going to be a good football coach. I think most people who follow high school football know my feelings on what happened up there, but that's neither here nor there. Walter Polke is going to be a good football coach, and the good people of Jay and Livermore Falls just need to give him a couple of honeymoon years. He's going to be starting at any one time 9 sophomores on either side of the ball this year, and their schedule is nightmarish. The first part of the year, they start with Greeley. They play Mountain Valley and Wells. They mix Falmouth in there. I mean, they may not get out of the chute real well, but they've got some kids that are playmakers, that some good athletes if they can just hang in.
Good thing about Walter Polke is he's from the area. He actually played youth football in the area, so even though he's coming from Winthrop and played high school football at Winthrop, he knows what Livermore Falls and Jay football is all about. And he talked when he got the job. He talked with me about connecting with the community, getting the community involved. It's a tough balance for coaches. There's a couple coaches over here in the wings who know exactly what I mean by that. But I think he understands that, and he's someone who's kind of proactively out there trying to mend some fences. It's obviously a difficult situation based on what happened last year. But someone who has his thumb on the pulse of a community like that is absolutely the perfect person to do that job, and hopefully everyone there understands.
And that's the key. You said community, and it has to become one community. It can't be two. Otherwise, you can't. You have to build your own program before you can worry about who your rivals are, and that's what they got to work on.
Again, from Michael Hoffer down Portland, Forecaster Way, is talking about Greeley. Sven Jacobson is going to be a horse. I really think they have a shot to upset the apple cart.
I do too.
Any buzz about the Rangers up, or York for that matter, up this way, or is it really just Wells and Mountain Valley again?
No, there is. I know me personally. I don't know about anybody else, but when you see Greeley 33, Cape nothing at Cape in any game at any time of the year, I don't care if it's the last exhibition of August, it gets your attention because you know what Cape has done the last few years. I don't think there's any overlooking Greeley anymore. I think they're in the mix. They kind of got everybody's attention last year, maybe a year ahead of schedule, and they're absolutely in the conversation. They're at Spruce Mountain Friday night, and that's a game that I think is going to be a tough assignment for Phoenix.
The thing I remember about Greeley from last year is speed. That's the first thing that comes to mind with Greeley with me. They just had speed all over the field, and can't teach it, as they say, and it becomes a very big weapon in high school football. There's no doubt about that.
Last one here for Western B. We're going to have a really general question. Randy, we'll start with you. Who's going to win? Who's going to come out of Western B? Comes from Philip.
Well, Phil, yep. I think I'm going to go with Mountain Valley. I just think there's a sense of they get one last chance to do it in Western B. And I think Jim Aylward will make that rallying point for them.
He will figure out the psyche of his kids, and he will work on it, and no coach will work harder on it and be more successful at it, and they will win Western B again, I believe. And maybe the last time we say that for a while, because it's going to be a building process after this year.
Fantastic, guys. Thank you very much. Our next group of teams that we're going to discuss comes from Eastern Class B. Last year it was a 2-horse race all season long. It was Leavitt and Mount Blue. Basically all season long, and those two teams provided us with 2 fantastic games, one during the regular season and of course the instant classic in the playoffs. This year, all our guys think it's going to be more of the same thing. Cal, Randy, same thing over and over again, Leavitt and Mount Blue.
Yeah, that's why we brought the coach in, because he'll probably tell us there's 6 or 7 teams that they're worried about. For me personally, I think it's a 2-horse race again, and wouldn't shock me if the gap even was wider between 2 and 3 this year. But there's some teams that have a lot to say about that. Obviously, they'll have a test Friday night. Leavitt will when they go to Hamden, and that's always a chippy game and a fun game, and a good way to start the season. So that's one team that would like to stick their nose in there. And certainly, you got a program like Gardner that. They won't be sold short. So before the season ends, we may take those words back. Right now, we think it's the Hornets and the Cougars.
Yeah, I think the gap between 2 and 3 might have closed a little bit, but I still think it's between Mount Blue and Leavitt. Part of that's me just hoping for 2 more great games, I guess. But part of that is you just look at the personnel look at the coaching staffs. I'm not trying to suck up to our guests. I think you're talking about far and away just the best in the conference, and that's a pretty tough combination to beat.
And you've both alluded to it. We do have Coach Hathaway from the Leavitt Hornets here on our mini set here at the Sun Journal with us. Thank you, Coach, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Just talk real quickly about the way things seem to be shaping up for your team so far this season. I know it's early, but we say it's early. You get a game in 3 days.
Yeah, it all goes by pretty quick when you're practicing twice a day and meetings and film and stuff like that. So, we've got a lot of guys to replace in the backfield. Obviously Jordan Hersom and Jake Willett are probably the first two names that comes to everybody's mind, but Ian Durgan was a very good football player for us last year. Jack Griffin and Jake Posick up front. There's some work to be done there, but I'm happy with where our guys are at this point. A lot of our backfield are juniors who played a lot as sophomores last year. Tyler Chacoin's taken over a quarterback. He's had a nice preseason so far. A little different quarterback type maybe than those other guys, but similar to some guys we've had in the past, and he's done a good job. And, Brian Bedard's probably the big name that we have back. Brian was a great receiver for us last year, played in the slot, and had a great playoff and state championship game. So, we're trying to just get those guys to get some rhythm in the pass game and get their reads down in the run game. And, we return a pretty good core in the offensive line. So, early in the season we'll probably run behind those guys quite a bit and try to let them kind of lead us.
Mike, you talk about Brian Bedard. I mean, he's the kind of guy that you find ways to get the ball. You still experimenting with that? Are you still playing with that idea a little bit and just trying to find the best ways to exploit his talent?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to line Brian up all over the field. I don't think it'll be any secret to anybody. I mean, he's going to play quarterback. He's going to play tailback. He's going to line up in the slot. He's going to line up out wide, and we'll get him the ball in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways too, that's hard for a defense. When you're focused on one guy who's lining up in a lot of places, you can kind of forget about some of those other guys, and we feel like those guys are good enough to make a lot of plays as well. But we're going to try to get Brian in space as much as we can, and let him do his thing.
Coach, you talk about some of these big names that have graduated and moved on. It seems like it happens every year. And I guess there are good sides and bad sides to being in some games in the regular season that aren't always competitive, because you get a lot of those kids in the game, you get them in the rhythm of playing at the varsity level and seeing what it's like, and it's not as much of a shock to the system, I would imagine, when you put them in there full time.
Yeah, I mean, those guys, they're on a lot of our special teams, already, and they get some time in those games, and lots of times in those games it's against the other team's varsity because they don't really pull their guys. So a lot of those guys are getting half a game against somebody else's ones on a Friday night, and then Monday, our JV schedule is pretty loaded with Class A and good Class B programs. So those guys are getting two pretty good quality games weeks. So I think they're ready, and I think our summer programs made a big difference. We had over 70 guys participate in our summer program, and they're there all the time. We have 7-on-7. We have camps. We went to New Hampshire this year and played in the Under Armour tournament. There's all sorts of stuff, and that kind of work pays off.
How's your defense shaping up? I mean, we always talk about the offensive side of the ball with you guys, but you guys always have a very good defense. Some names back there that people are familiar with, and then some other spots where you guys are looking to fill some holes.
Yeah, we lost a fair amount on our defensive line, our ends and our interior guys, so we're trying to replace there. We kind of rotate a lot of guys in those spots anyway, so we feel pretty good about it. But we had kind of some injuries at linebacker last year. We started the year with Josh Bunker and Jake Willett, and Bunker tore his ACL in week 1, and then Brandon Collins stepped in and he tore his ACL against Mount Blue week 6. Levi Morin took over, and he was he played at an all-conference level, I thought, in the playoffs. So, we've got some guys back now. Those guys are healthy. It's almost like getting some transfers in. You're getting some guys that didn't, Bunker didn't see the field really. So they've been at Leavitt the whole time. It's good. So, we moved Brandon Collins down to defensive end to fill one of those gaps. Kevin Russell and Connor O'Malley are two kids that played a lot last year that are getting in there and filling in as well. And then Levi and Bunker are pretty solid inside there, and Nate Coombs, Brian Bedard come back in the secondary. Those guys have started last year. So Brian started for 3 years back there. So we feel pretty good about that side of the ball as well. If we can shore up our special teams a little bit, we'll be in good shape.
We have one question for you so far here on our interactive chat. Comes from our buddy Mike Hoffer down at the Forecaster. Covers a lot of the Western B and Western A schedule. He qualifies this by saying, I know coaches always like to focus on this year, but he wants to know, how often are you playing back that Mount Blue regional final game in your head? Or how often did you, over the course of the summertime, and in the off-season, knowing how much of an instant classic it truly was?
We watched a lot of Mount Blue film in the summertime to get ready for Mount Blue this year. So, we've seen that game a few times, and, if you guys ever see the video again, I think my favorite moment is when Jake scores the touchdown on the shovel passes. His father actually jumps over the fence without touching it and tackles him in the end zone. It's pretty sweet. I think Paul played for Lewiston for Skip back in the day, and he was showing his athleticism there. That was just a great experience for our kids. I know it probably hurt Mount Blue to be on the other side of that, but that was a great football game. And everybody who was there has come away saying that's the best game they've ever seen. So, it was a lot of fun, and it's something we're never going to forget. And but at the same time, we're trying to move on as well. So
you probably know more about Mount Blue than we do. So tell us what you think.
Write them down.
I think for them, they return some very physical kids. Some of their more higher profile skill kids are gone, like Senek and Tracy and Hilton. The Barry kid as well. But the guys they bring back up front are very solid. I mean, Zach Kendall and Luca at defensive ends they're phenomenal. They're just going to be a physical team, and then they have Whitney at quarterback. So when you can match that physical run game with a gifted kid like that who's experienced at that position, that's a tough match. We're looking forward to playing them because they got a great staff and they got a great team. And those are the games we like to play in, so it's going to be fun.
Another question that popped up here when we were talking earlier, I know we mentioned you folks and we mentioned Mount Blue. Those are our two Eastern B teams in our immediate coverage area here. But someone brought up the fact that Hamden Academy, which has always seemed to be a thorn in your side in particular, certainly over a couple of years before last year, maybe a sleeper in Eastern Class B. And is that first Cal and Randy, and then we'll get Coach Hathaway's response to that. But does Hamden seem to be another one of those teams that might be kind of creeping up on that number 3-4 spot in the conference?
They've always been right there, and they've never lacked for confidence. I'll say that about Hamden. And they've never lacked for creativity. They try to do different things to get the ball in their playmakers' hands. And I don't know. My whole train of thought, if you're going to go against a team that's theoretically going to be one of the best in the league, why not do it in week one? Why not catch them early and take your shot at them? And that's what they'll get a chance to do on Friday night.
They've got the heir apparent to Alonzo Connor, right? That seems to be the case. Probably the best running back in the conference. Is that right? Is that how you see it?
He's a good running back. There's some other good ones too.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of speed. He's a powerful kid. You can tell he's in the weight room. They've got some big play potential with him and with Matt Hawes. Matt Hawes at wing back, and when they line him up out wide, he's a good threat on counters, and he's a good threat in the pass game. Those are two kids that can get the ball in the end zone, and anytime you have that, you have a chance. So, they on paper they probably returned more guys than anybody. I think they only had 4 seniors last year. They're definitely going to be in the mix. For them it always seems to come down to how they can execute at the end of the season. So this first game traditionally has always been a very close game between us and them, and I'd expect no different this week. And
traditionally a very long game too, right?
Yeah, there's been a few overtime ones, and there's been a lot that's gone on in between the
3-hour regulation games.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. We're excited for the challenge, and I'm sure they are too.
Another question comes in before we wrap up here. The reclassification issue, how do you feel like that's going to pan out, Mike, for your team in particular and just the league in general? How do you feel like that's going to work for you guys?
I think for our team, it's a great move. When the proposal came out, Jeff Ramish and I met for quite a while and talked about, kind of how it shook out and where we ended up and what we should do. And I know there's been some people who have said you guys should petition up or whatever, but we looked at Eastern and Western B the way it's set up, and I believe Mount Blue and Coney are the only two teams that are within 1 hour of us. And who's to say they'd even put us in that league if we petitioned up? So I look at C West, and you've got Spruce Mountain, you've got Mountain Valley, you've got Cape, you've got York, you've got Wells. Poland and Freeport, I think, are programs that are on the rise. There's some. That seems like it'll be a good league. It would be nice to play Mountain Valley again, to be honest, and to play Wells and York again. Those were great games back in the Campbell Conference days when I played and when I first coached at Leavitt. And now with Spruce Mountain being kind of a natural geographic rival, I think it's a great situation for us. On the whole, for the state of Maine, I think it's a good thing. I think with the shrinking enrollments in Eastern Class A, there had to be a move where we shifted some Western teams over that way. It was the only way it was going to work, and I think it sets a lot of programs up to be a lot better.
Another question coming in from our online readers. Of course, we always talk about missing players from year to year, but this year you also lost a couple of key guys on your staff, with Coach Hersom and Coach Bachler not being there anymore. Has that had an effect on things so far this preseason?
It's a little different. I've coached with Dave every year I've been at Leavitt, so not having him around is different. But I don't think it's hurt us at all. Randy Chacoin has been on our staff for a few years now. At some point I knew that Dave probably wouldn't be with us, and we've kind of groomed Randy to be that guy. And I think I told somebody the other day, he's kind of the perfect mix of intensity and intelligence, and lots of times with line coaches you can have a little too much of one or the other. He's a pretty good balance, and he's done a good job stepping into that position. And we'll miss Coach Hersom as a defensive mind, but I guess our free agent pickup in the offseason of Coach Bonnevie was a pretty good one. Mark's a great guy. He's a great communicator. He just fits in really well on the staff. The kids love him. And he's a great X and O guy. I mean, he knows what he's doing over there. And for me, having another guy who's been a head coach on the staff is valuable, because that guy's a resource for you. And as much as you'd like to think you never know enough. You need guys to bounce ideas off and help you out. So
you guys can start an Urban Meyer Admiration Society.
That'd be fine. Cal's wearing the Florida shirt. I like that too.
Last one here for Coach Hathaway before we switch it up. It's kind of almost like a tongue-in-cheek question, comes in with a smiley face on it from someone calling himself Coach J Mac, asking you how many different ways do you plan on running trap this season? Because apparently that's something that you'll understand. Obviously, you're laughing at that. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've always that's been a staple of our run game is the trap. So we've found a few ways to run it. Every year we try to do things a little bit differently. We try to adjust it to our personnel, but it seems like every year we have two guards that like to get around there and hit guys, and they do a good job at it. So I think it will still be a pretty high volume part of our offense.
I've got one more for you too myself. Source of pride to see a couple of your guys going on to play in Division I. Over the last few years, you've had almost a pipeline up to UMaine with a couple of your guys, and same thing this year. A couple of the guys up there on the roster. You got to be a source of pride for your program to see those guys succeed like that.
Yeah, obviously, that's the premier program in Maine, and there's not a lot of Maine kids on that roster. So I think the schools that have those kids, it is a great source of pride, and everybody knows it. And the great thing about Doug and Matt is they come back in the summer and they're in the weight room with our kids. They're out on the field with our kids. They still are a huge part of our program, and when kids see that as an example, it lets them know that they can do it. And I'm proud of our guys that go and play Division III, because that's not easy either. Jordan's at Springfield, and Jake Willett and Jake Posick are both at Norwich. Jason Fisher from a couple of years ago decided to play at Husson this year. So Zach Frost is at Maine Maritime for his second year. It's great to see those guys go on to the next level, and when they have some success, that makes you feel good. Thank you very much, Coach Hathaway. We appreciate your taking the time out to be with us here at
at our wonderful studios here.
It's quite studio you guys have back here. It's pretty good.
Spare no expense.
It's the nicest one I've been in.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
guys. Take
Good
care.
luck.
Thank you.
And Eastern Class B. Final thoughts here, Cal and Randy. Leavitt and Mountain Blue, I think we've pretty much cemented that as our picks for the top two.
I think that's where we're coming from, and it'll be a great game again. Again, as I did last year, would give the slight edge to Leavitt, and that was probably the one thing I was right about last year.
And now, thank you very much again for joining us here. We've got one more major classification here to go here with our preview show here at sunjournal.com, and that is Eastern Class A. Of course, Eastern Class A includes Lewiston, Edward Little, and Oxford Hills, among many others, Lawrence, Bangor, to name a few. We'd like to bring in our second special guest of the evening for this segment, Edward Little coach Dave Sterling. He's with the Red Eddies again this season. Let's start with his thoughts on Eastern Class A this season and how he and his team at Edward Little fit into this equation.
It's going to be very interesting. We've got a lot of young guys that have really stepped up and are playing some crucial roles within our offense and defensively, as far as fitting in and being able to play our area of responsibility defense will be very challenging for them, and we'll have to take it week by week. If you look at Eastern Maine, you've got to start with Lawrence, who's obviously the big dog in the house. They've got a great system. They have an excellent quarterback that's returning. A lot of the kids in the system have been playing it since they were in third grade, so they know what they're doing. Then you go to Bangor, and Coach Hackett has a program that basically identifies themselves as we are Bangor, try and stop us. And we know how that goes sometimes when we've met them. Then you get into a couple of the other playoff teams. Brunswick, who's got an excellent wing T program that runs very well through Coach Cooper, and they've developed it over the years, as well as kids that know how to pull as guards, as well as their defensive mind that they have with Greg Netto. Then you look at Messalonsky, and they're a double wing team that's had some excellent athletes come through there. They've just been able to light people up, as you guys saw last year, as we experienced. And then you look at, throughout the Eastern division of Class A, you get programs like Oxford Hills that has a new coach. They're going to run a triple option, which has a whole dynamic to what teams have to prepare for each week. You go to Skowhegan, which has a new coach, and Coach Friedman, who's bringing a spread offense, totally opposite of what they've run in the past with the double wing. Oxford, go past Oxford Hills and them, then you start getting into Mount Ararat, which is a rebuilding program and could be on the rise. You talk about Lewiston, and you've got Coach County, who's one of the staples within Eastern A, who's always provided a great running game, challenges everyone as far as stop his offense, and he's got a great coaching staff to help balance out what he wants to do each week. And then Coney. Coney's the one that's probably the team in the mix that has a great returning quarterback. They've got an excellent offense that they like to spread the field, and it's going to really be tough for people to get after them because they've really had a system going for a few years now, and they've got a really good quarterback like they had with Dunkley a couple of years ago. So it'll be interesting for the whole Eastern program.
Coach, you talk about the diversity of offenses in the Pine Tree Conference, and where do kind of the Eddies fit in that mix? You've got some weapons in the passing game in particular. It looks like you'll be able to kind of do some special things potentially.
Yep, we have an excellent quarterback in Sean Ford, who's a senior. We also have a senior in Quinn Leary, who's probably one of the better tight ends in Eastern A. And then you talk about some of our underclassmen who can get out and spread the field, like John Boyd at running back, Jeff Clark at receiver, Ian Malikas, who's a sophomore, Caleb Sproul. You talk about Cam Cormier, who's an excellent hockey player, moves his feet well, can find the open area, and loves to deliver blows downfield. And you've got a great balance as far as what we want to do to spread the field. And we've got some linemen that have been in our system now for, this is my third year, that understand the system and know how to execute in it. So.
You talked about the conference, and not that there's any breaks any week, but you guys run the gauntlet early on, and it seems like to be the case every year. I mean, you guys must be used to it by now. But
well, you know where you stand, and that's why Bill County and I really pushed for. Previous years we'd done a three-way exhibition, and both of us wanted to get back to the old way of Yale and Lewiston. It gave us both an understanding as to where we stood within our conference, as well as what we had to challenge our own kids as far as the season got started. We didn't really get that flow. It was nice to play Hathaway, Coach Hathaway from Leavitt, with his spread attack, but we weren't really seeing that in Eastern Ag. So this past exhibition that we had in Lewiston really got both programs, I think, on the right note as far as what we want to do, how we have to adjust with our kids, and it gives us an idea of what's in Eastern Ag and what we should expect going forward.
How was the atmosphere of that game? It seems like a lot of points were scored. It seems like it was kind of a back and forth, exciting game. What was it like? The first time, I believe, since the mid-'80s they played that exhibition game.
Yeah, I think I was one of the last classes to play in it. Very little.
That long ago.
Yeah, that long ago. It was really good. To get that type of a rivalry to start off the season really kickstarts your program from having a scrimmage that's controlled, and you can't really play a team that you're going to be able to stop and then get the ball back, or if they fumble, you have to let them keep the ball and keep playing, to getting into a system where the kids grew up a few miles across the river from each other. They didn't really like each other. They get to start off the season, go out and bang heads, and now they're ready to get into the full gear and start meeting other teams in the state. So I think it's excellent.
Coach, we have an online reader that has a question for you. Extolling the talent that Bangor and Lawrence has, how does anybody compete with Bangor and Lawrence this season, and who finishes third behind those two? Now, I know there's a handful of coaches out there that would probably like to think that they're not battling for third place, that they're battling for first. But obviously Bangor and Lawrence have very good programs.
They do.
Who can challenge them? Who do you see as a team that really has a chance to go and challenge those guys this year?
I'll go into my Bill Belichick phase. Day to day, week to week, how you practice for the week, how you prepare for the opponent. It is what it is. We'll see how we go as the season gets along. I can't really tell you there's going to be X team upsetting another team, but that's how it runs.
Is it tough, though, to have, I mean, as much as you want to try and have the mentality and tell your kids every day, anybody can beat anybody on any given day, how hard is it to try and have the kids believe that going into a game? It's got to be pretty tough.
You covered our team 2 years ago, right? You remember how we
Absolutely
made a playoff run against a team that I think, Cal, you predicted we'd be 1-7 that year, right?
Probably.
Yep, we ended up 5-3 and played Bangor very well in a playoff game. That's the way it's got to go. Kids have to be ready week to week, and you can do it. You just have to be prepared through the week. What I like to tell our players and parents before we start a season is, it's not my speech on Friday night that wins games. It's the work they do through the week getting ready.
There's some big games. I mean, they're playing Lawrence on Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about teams that are in that middle of that pack. Coney and Messalonsky play each other Friday night. I think the winner of that game probably comes out of it feeling like they're a team that's in that conversation. So, a lot of potential just in week one.
And one team, of course, in Eastern A that we haven't mentioned very much of yet so far is Oxford Hills. They're a program that has been kind of down over the last couple of years as far as wins and losses is concerned. But they're a team that a lot of times has played teams very, very tough. As Edward Little well knows, over the last couple of years, the Epic was it 2 years ago, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, the Epic 7 or 5 overtimes and regular season game, and it was just absolutely 6 perhaps, yeah. So there's a team that. With a new coach this year going forward, there's a team that, again, you don't take any team lightly, but there's a team that might cause some concern for some of the teams too, especially in the middle of that pack.
They were competitive in just about every game they played last year. Yeah, at the end of the day, their end of the season, they're 1-8, but it wasn't really a reflection of when I saw them. They competed pretty well with the likes of Bangor and Brunswick and teams like that.
I think the big thing for them is the coaches. The kids get the sense that the coaches feel an attachment to the program, an attachment to the kids. They really felt that last year. Everybody seems to be on the same page this year. I know when they hired Mark Soren, one of the things Jeff Benson, the athletic director, said was the kids wanted someone that came from the program, that was a coach, and really seemed to have some sense of ownership with that program. I think that's big in terms of setting the right attitude, setting the right tone.
And even though they've had turnover at the head coaching position, a lot of their coaching staff has kind of remained the same. They've had the continuity as far as assistants. Some of the former head coaches have come back as assistants. I think that's good for the health of the program. They just need to continue to keep their numbers up. keep kids healthy. They're learning another new offense. They're learning that same offense, the flex bone that Poland runs. So there's going to be a learning curve there. They're not really settled on their quarterback, but they've got some playmakers, and defensively they were as good as anybody last year. That was the strength of the team, and probably will be again.
Well, folks, we're getting close to the end here. If you have any more final questions for our panel here, Kalle Oaks, Randy Whitehouse, and Edward Little, head coach Dave Sterling, let us know. Send us a quick question. Question from PTC fan: is Coach Sterling happy to see Jeff Turcotte graduate from Lewiston High School? I think most of the PTC coaches are happy to see Jeff.
PTC are pretty happy about that. I had survived 2 Turcottes at running back when I was here, defensive coordinator that were little at one point. So yeah, it's nice to see him win. He's a great kid. Had the opportunity to coach the Lobster Bowl with him. He comes and works out at the Edward Little weight room during the summer, as well as stops by, and he'll do wonderful wherever he goes. I know he's out at Hebron Academy right now, but the college that picks him up will be blessed with a great young man.
One reader wants to know where everybody's going this weekend. We know where Dave's going to be. He's going to be at Walton Field. That's actually where I'm going to be as well.
Griffin Field, high atop Livermore Falls for me, as Spruce Mountain plays Greeley.
Greeley to battle in Class B. And Randy?
Got Poland Friday night, and then I'm heading to Oak Hill on Saturday. So.
Oak Hill on Saturday.
In 90-degree weather. So
yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it's going to be a fantastic hydration and keep those mustard packets ready.
Yes, you know it.
You stressing that this week, Dave? I mean,
pickle juice.
That's true.
Pickle juice, bouillon cubes, all
stressing
nine
kids
yards.
stay hydrated and get their fluids all week.
You got to be ready to go.
Yeah.
Got to be ready to go.
How many water buckets do you keep on the sidelines for them during the game?
We keep 4. Usually they're empty by the end of the game. Yep.
Fantastic. Well, if there's nothing else, folks, it looks like we're all set here. We thank you all very much for joining us. We thank Dave and Mike Hathaway, of course, the Leavitt coach who was here with us earlier, Randy Whitehouse, Kalle Oaks. I'm Justin Pelletier. This has been Sun Media's Productions High School Football Preview for 2012. This will be archived for your viewing later on this week. Feel free to click back over to sunjournal.com and see your favorite class or region profiled here for a football preview. But for now, I'm Justin Pelletier again. Kalle, Randy, Dave, and Mike Hathaway, Patty Reeves behind the camera. Thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.
And that's a wrap.